What's up gamers, Lextri here with a Diablo 4 update. We're 57 days away from the early access release of Diablo 4, and Blizzard just released a new video covering the endgame. Let's go over the info and my thoughts on it.
We're really excited about getting this game into players' hands and letting them experience this massive world.
A main cornerstone of D4 is play your way. As a player,
So Joe mentions play your way, which has been a long time motto for Diablo games. This can be really hard to get right, and it all comes down to game balance. We can't really talk about endgame balance yet because we only got to play up to level 25 in the last beta test. But for the early game leveling, balance was all over the place. Just as an example, Landslide is Druid's best core skill starting off by far. With 113 base weapon damage hitting twice per cast, it's one of the best starting skills among all the classes. The problem is a lot of players had trouble leveling Druid because they didn't use Landslide and all the other skills sucked in comparison. Now I realize a lot of these skills become enabled later on with legendary aspects, but they need to be balanced without them if we truly want play your way from the beginning.
player continues to advance through the story and into the endgame. They'll unlock a ton of brand new activities that provide meaningful progression, no matter their playstyle.
Players will be able to keep progressing in the narrative of the game. Alongside that, the whole team has worked on crafting a variety of different experiences players can pursue.
We're going to have an entire world of Sanctuary for our players to offer. There's going to never be an absence of something to do.
I just gotta say Ash is my favorite developer because she loves fudge as much as we do. I do hope it's true that we won't run out of things to do. ARPG games have been cyclical in their gameplay with their seasonal content, usually releasing new updates every 3 or 4 months for new seasons. While it's great to constantly get new content, the drop-off after a season start can happen as soon as 2 weeks. The challenge will be trying to keep players engaged for over a month, let alone the entire 3-month season.
After the player has finished the campaign, there's a lot more game to go and participate in. They gain access to a special, what we call Capstone dungeon that they have to complete. Once they're able to finish this Capstone dungeon, they're going to gain access to the first world tier.
As you complete the world tier, it will open up the opportunity for you to go into your next world tier. That involves unlocking powerful loot, new items, and more advantages for your player to have a better opportunity at end game.
The word tiers are a great idea to increase replay value, but can be kind of boring if it just scales monster HP and damage. Hearing certain items are locked behind word tiers is really interesting and can really incentivize players to push themselves further.
Whether you're a fan of dungeons, PvP, or just roaming around the world, there's a way to continue your Diablo adventure long after hitting max level. As your character continues to grow in power, you'll start with the skill tree and expand out into the Paragon system.
A lot of the choices the players make are grounded on skills themselves and the fantasies associated with those skills. The Paragon Boards place where we're allowed to have a lot more depth, a lot more customization, many more options as you go.
So the Paragon board, not to be confused with Paragon in Diablo 3, is an additional character progression system. I don't think they should have included the Paragon term at all because it can leave a bad feeling for some players. Diablo 3's Paragon system is an infinite grind of greater rifts just to keep getting +5 to main stat. It was incredibly uninspiring to keep grinding for main stat endlessly, and to be competitive you had to either no-life the game, or bot or account share. So it created an unhealthy and unfair gaming environment. The Paragon board looks like it's mainly main stats, but hopefully these glyphs and legendary nodes are interesting enough. During the beta test I felt like the skill trees alone were not giving enough character customization, so hopefully the Paragon boards can give a little more creative freedom to building your characters.
You can rotate the board, so you can choose a different path if you're like, I want to do more strength-based things, or I want these particular boons or glyphs. You can chart your path through it, and they're really a way for you to keep expanding your character and making it uniquely yours.
So Kaylee explained some interesting choices you have with rotating the Paragon board. The challenge with the customization here is to give players multiple viable choices to make. Meaning if you give players these choices to make, there's not just one right answer and then everything else is just wrong. If there's only one optimal way to do things, then everything else is just a trap for players and it becomes an illusion of choice.
Similar to the Paragon Boards is the Codex of Power. It's an in-game system that holds the aspects related to the character. You are able to complete a dungeon and they will have a chance to drop an aspect that you can pick up.
And what this allows players to do is take items they're finding in the world and make them more powerful, turn them into legendary items.
It's really special to discover what kind of playstyle really means the most to you.
So the Codex of Power holds aspects that are actually weaker than the ones that you find on legendary drops, making this a beginner crafting system. This is great to use while you're still leveling before you can find a ton of legendaries. My only concern here is some of the aspects that you might need to enable your build might not be obtainable right away if they're in a dungeon that you can't get to yet.
Every part of Sanctuary is fulfilling and satisfying. Dungeons in particular are really close to my heart. Nightmare dungeons are going to give the players the opportunity to experience a dungeon that they might have already experienced in their past playthroughs. They'll enter the dungeon with a found sigil that alters the playstyle and the intensity of the dungeon.
They're more difficult and they have additional objectives, and then they also have affixes, which add a degree of difficulty for you and your group to work through.
Yes, finally we have difficulty scaling that's not just giving monsters more HP and damage. In Diablo 3 we have 150 Greater Rift levels, and the only thing that changes is the monsters get more HP and damage. It's an incredibly boring and lazy way to make the game more difficult. Now they're talking about increasing difficulty with objectives and affixes to make you actually play differently. I'm really looking forward to the Nightmare dungeons as an endgame activity. The dungeons we got to play so far were very well designed, all with different themes and monsters to keep things fresh.
One of my favorite affixes that you can find in Nightmare Dungeons is actually called Hellgate. Occasionally, these portals will open up throughout the area that will just pour out different monsters that aren't native to that region for you to also be dealing with while you're trying to handle everything else inside the dungeon.
That's a pretty cool affix, but people are going to get mad at me when I say my favorite is actually Waller. Partially because it enrages players, and invoking that feeling from someone is better than having no feeling at all. Waller can be incredibly frustrating, but it does change the way a player plays the game, putting up a literal wall they have to overcome.
In Diablo 4, we have a focus on the world of Sanctuary, and there are parts of that world that we call the Fields of Hatred, where Lilith's presence in Sanctuary has begun to seep through and manifest these poisonous areas throughout the world. When players go to these regions, they get to engage in player versus player conflict.
These offer opportunities for the player to collect shards. But there is a little bit of a catch. In order to get these shards back to town, you will need to purify them. Other players will definitely know that you're attempting to purify your shards, so you'd better be prepared to fight if you're going to be playing any PvP, and be prepared that you might lose some stuff in the meantime.
Once they've got the purified shards, they can take these, go back to nearby towns to sell them, and then use that to buy a whole bunch of interesting cosmetic items and rewards.
It's a place for people who really love PvP and want to still get loot and still increase their character's power. If that's the way they want to play, they can.
I am a PvP enthusiast, so I'm looking forward to this area. We got our first glimpse at organized PvP in the Diablo franchise with Immortals Battlegrounds. I had fun with the PvP in Diablo Immortal, but I just couldn't keep up with the pay to win, so I'm even more excited for Diablo 4's PvP. The Fields of Hatred is interesting, but it's not completely PvP, mixing in some PvE activities as well. It's a great start, but I hope they include more organized PvP like Battlegrounds and Arena with updates in the future. I actually got to ask the devs if there were any future PvP plans, and there doesn't seem to be any right now. In fact, the devs I asked seem to be allergic to the idea of even fighting other players. I'm hoping if players build communities around PvP to show their interest, Blizzard will react and give us more of it.
Launch is just the beginning. One of the things we're really focused on is creating a living, breathing set of updates for players to engage with after the game has gone live.
It's really just going to be a way to keep coming back and experiencing more Diablo 4 in fresh ways.
We're really eager to hear all of your experiences and just enjoy the entire story with you all.
The game is already looking amazing, so I'm looking forward to the constant updates that we get for Diablo 4. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel to get more Diablo 4 content. Feel free to join our Discord if you want to chat with the community. Peace out and happy slaying.